6 women sat across from me while the same voice poured from 6 phones. Mara's voice, calm, wounded, almost maternal. In every recording, she warned us that someone we loved was unsafe. Only the names changed. My tongue tasted metallic as I stared at the woman beside me, who was silently crying into a paper napkin. How had my best friend delivered the same private nightmare to 6 different people? And why had none of us known the others existed? 8 months earlier, my life still had clean edges. I owned a small interior design firm in Denver called Northline, and I was preparing to open a second studio with a $52,000 lease deposit. Mara had been my closest friend since college. After my mother died, she brought groceries, answered client emails, and remembered every appointment I forgot. She carried a black moleskin marked with tiny silver crescent stickers saying, "I document patterns, not people." Why would that sentence ever trouble me? Mara knew details nobody else knew. The panic attacks after my mother's funeral, my fear of losing Northline, the exact words my fiancé Daniel used during arguments. She never demanded trust. She performed it. She would lower her voice and say, "You don't have to defend anyone to me." Then wait until silence became unbearable. Eventually, I filled it. One evening, after writing something in that crescent-marked notebook, she asked whether Daniel had always been so controlling, or only since my mother died. The first evidence looked convincing. Mara showed me screenshots suggesting Daniel had mocked my anxiety to his brother. His contact photo, his phrasing, even his habit of typing honestly before something cruel. It was all there. Daniel denied sending them, then became furious that I believed Mara. She predicted that reaction perfectly. People get loud when the truth corners them, she whispered afterward. My chest tightened as though she had named something I had refused to see. But how had she known exactly what he would say? Then Mara turned her attention to Anna, my bookkeeper of 4 years. She claimed Anna had been asking vendors about Northline's cash reserves and showed me an email with Anna's signature beneath it. Anna swore it was fabricated. I suspended her anyway. The following morning, Mara arrived with cinnamon coffee and quietly reorganized my banking permissions until things stabilized. By Friday, she had access to payroll, vendor accounts, and the deposit fund for the new studio. What had I handed her while believing she was protecting me? Daniel moved out after I accused him of trying to sabotage my expansion. He stood beside 3 packed boxes, his face drained of expression, and asked me to compare the screenshots with our phone records. Mara had already warned me he would hide behind technicalities. I repeated those words to him like they were mine. When the door closed, my knees buckled against the kitchen cabinet. Mara arrived 18 minutes later, although I had never called her. How had she known the exact moment I would be alone? 2 weeks later, $18 disappeared from Northline's deposit account. Mara called it a temporary vendor retainer and produced an invoice from Summit Procurement, LLC. The address belonged to a mailbox store near Colfax Avenue. When I questioned her, she went completely still. Then her eyes filled with tears. She said my suspicion proved Daniel had poisoned me against the only person who had stayed. I ended up apologizing while my own money sat in someone else's account. But what kind of friend makes you beg forgiveness for noticing a theft? The studio lease collapsed 12 days later. I lost the $11,000 preliminary construction payment, and 3 employees began sending resumes elsewhere. Mara insisted Anna had created the financial mess before leaving. She suggested I sell my mother's sapphire ring to cover payroll, then flinched when I refused. That involuntary movement stayed with me. Mara had comforted me while I wore that ring at the funeral. Why did she look irritated that there was still one valuable thing she could not reach? The break came from our office printer. While searching its scan history for Anna's disputed email, I found a folder created under Mara's login. Pattern files. Inside were photographs of moleskin pages, each marked with silver crescent stickers. My name appeared beside instructions. Invoke mother. Frame Daniel as controlling. Separate from Anna before transfer. Beneath mine were 5 other names, each followed by bank balances, family wounds, and phrases tailored to provoke them. If these were Mara's patterns, who were the other people? I contacted the first name, Rebecca Sloan, through LinkedIn. She answered before the second ring and went silent when I mentioned Mara. Rebecca had lost $27,000 after Mara convinced her that her business partner was stealing. Priya Desai had been pushed away from her sister during a custody dispute. Mara's former roommate, Elise, still had voice notes warning that her fiancé was unsafe. Within 48 hours, 6 of us were comparing identical language, forged messages, and payments to Summit Procurement. How many lives had she rehearsed before mine? That was the conference room with 6 phones. We listened until Mara's tenderness became mechanical. She paused in the same places, sighed on cue, used grief like a lockpick. Anna joined us with server logs proving her email had been forged from Mara's laptop at 2:13 a.m. Daniel brought phone records showing no messages had gone to his brother. My hands shook so violently that the papers rattled against the glass table, but we finally had something Mara could not manipulate: each other. Would she still deny it when we stood together? We invited Mara to Northline under the pretense of signing emergency loan documents. When she entered, enlarged photographs of her notebook pages covered the wall. Her face emptied. Then she recovered and looked directly at me. "You know how unstable these women are," she said softly. I played my recording. "Invoke mother if resistant." Her jaw tightened. She lunged for the speaker, knocking a ceramic sample tray onto the concrete. As shards skittered around her shoes, she hissed, "I built you when you were nothing." Was that what she had believed all along? Mara tried tears, fury, and finally silence. But the evidence had already been copied to 3 attorneys and a detective. Summit Procurement belonged to an LLC registered under her father's middle name. Investigators traced $86,700 from 4 victims into its account. She pleaded guilty to felony theft and identity fraud 11 months later, receiving 18 months in county detention, 5 years probation, and a restitution order. When the judge read our names aloud, Mara stared at the floor. For once, she had no private version of the truth left to sell. Northline survived in a smaller building, and Anna returned as my financial controller. Daniel and I rebuilt slowly, without promises we had not earned. I wear my mother's sapphire ring on difficult days, and whenever its weight presses against my finger, I remember the moment 6 strangers placed their phones on one table. Mara made secrecy her sharpest weapon, but the sound that ended her was all of us pressing play.